This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
This podcast is sponsored by The Forward. Stay up to date with unlimited access to news, culture, and opinion all through a Jewish lens. And for our listeners, for 2NJB listeners, get 6 months of The Forward for $15. Visit forward.com/partner offer and enter promo code 2NJB to get an exclusive offer for podcast listeners. Also in collaboration with Arutz Sheva, IsraelNationalNews.com. And last but not least, in collaboration with Australian Jewish News, check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com. CEO of a company that was valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. Executive at Nickelodeon and MTV, and recently, a novelist. These are just a few of the entries on today's guest's resume. Shaul Olmert was CEO of Playbuzz, a company that for quite a while dominated online content. If you were on Facebook five years ago, there's zero chance you didn't come across a Playbuzz article. Today, he is CEO and co-founder of a stealth mode startup called Piggy, and recently, he's written a novel, one that caused him to ask himself, is Shaul Olmert an entrepreneur and businessman who just wrote a book, or is he a novelist who's been masquerading as an entrepreneur and a businessman? Well, today we get to find out. We are super excited, super thrilled to be joined by Shaul Olmert to talk about his business endeavors, his new novel, and what his favorite Playbuzz article was. Which one?
Hello.
Hey.
A Playbuzz article. So Playbuzz was a platform that enabled everyone. It was free, so everyone had access to it. Still does. The company still exists and is growing and blooming. Everyone can access the platform and use it to author their own content using the suite of tools that Playbuzz offers. So we had content creators from all over the world, hundreds of thousands of content creators along the years. I think that there was no shortage. There was just huge diversity of topics and verticals and languages. We had content creators from countries that I'm not even sure if those countries actually exist or where they just created so people can write Playbuzz content from. But if I have to put my finger on one piece of content, there was one piece of content that really changed my perception on many different things. It was kind of a holdup. Like, when you're trying to identify a criminal and you come to the police station, they put you in front of 10 different suspects, out of which only one is the actual suspects and all the other are decoys.
A lineup.
A lineup.
Yeah.
And so they created some sort of a lineup for people if you can identify people that you've just seen, and to prove that people from different races, it's very hard for them to identify people from other races. So it was really a very
That's racist, what you just said.
On the contrary, it was coming to show that we are all, it was really questioning the identification of a suspect in a particular murder case. And the claim was that it was very easy for people of a certain race to, misidentify the suspect because they're not used to seeing that kind of, those kind of facial features. And I thought it was just a very smart use of the platform and an article that really changed my perception of, my confidence that I can really call out and really identify people from different origins.
Well, we are not a billion-dollar startup yet, but we do have a sponsor.
If you're listening, guys, you have some interest in Israel, I'm sure. So Masa Israel Journey, you got to check them out. You go to masaisrael.org/2nicejewishboys, TWO, Nice Jewish Boys, masaisrael.org/2nicejewishboys. Check them out. They have great opportunities for coming to Israel and starting your career. You can explore your career path. You can live out your passions, make a positive impact. You can also come to Israel and work and study remotely from Israel. So check them out, masaisrael.org/TWO, Nice Jewish Boys.
Also,
Yes.
very exciting new sponsor.
This episode is sponsored by the Susie and Kevin Davis Foundation, which supports New York City's underserved community through its nonprofit First Workings. Guys, Kevin Davis and Susie Davis are amazing, and their foundation is even more amazing. Check them out, First Workings. You can find more information about them at firstworkings.org. Basically, First Workings arranges paid internships, mentorships, and extensive workplace readiness training for very bright students from New York's public schools. Check them out, firstworkings.org,
Highly recommended.
and consider supporting their efforts because it's really an amazing
You just
cause.
know with Kevin and Susie Davis and their amazing foundation, you just know every shekel you put there
is a good
is going to
shekel
go
spent.
to the right place.
Yeah. For firstworkings.org.
So back to business. Playbuzz. I mean, if you live in Israel and you know a little bit about the tech industry, Playbuzz it's a legend, really, right? I mean, it's huge.
I don't know if it is, but I sure enjoy hearing that. Look, it's one of those things. You start something and you have no idea where it's going to take you.
How was it
And
born?
Statistically, it's statistically 95% or so of startups are failing after a year or 18 months. So you have no idea where it's going to lead to. And it started out of genuine passion. When I started it, and it's true for my current company as well, I did not for a second think about how can I make money, or how can I conquer the world, or even about how can I accomplish something and be successful and get the fortune and glory. It was more about just I really wanted this product to happen. I mean, I felt like I'm reading content online. And I find that like many others, I develop a reading fatigue. It becomes really challenging. It's more like a chore. If somebody sends you a link to an article and you click on it and you open it up and then you just like scroll down just to see how long the article is. And you're like, wow, do I really have to read all that now? And, I think it's a problem. I think technology and many other factors weighed in to really distract us from being able to focus for a longer period of time and consume longer form content when we're in the middle of the day, when we're multitasking and we're doing a couple of things at the same time. So I figured that there's got to be a way to convey content in a way that's going to be shorter, more interactive, more visual, and really just more appealing to users. And that was the quest behind Playbuzz.
So I feel like when talking about Playbuzz, it's clear that it's not as present today. I mean, there's something happened where Playbuzz all of a sudden, it was huge, right? It was like there was a day where you scrolling through Facebook, you really couldn't like avoid, I don't know, every 5 posts was a Playbuzz post, probably even more. But today you don't see it as often. So what happened there that just kind of on Facebook, for example, made Playbuzz? Was the business model too reliant on Facebook? What happened?
Actually, the evolution of the company is that at a certain point, we started pursuing less volume and less distribution and more, I would say, vertically integrated partnerships. So now the platform that used to be completely free is no longer free. It's open only to paying partners. So there are fewer of them, and that's why you don't see that, you don't run into that content as much as you used to. But I also think that Facebook changed its policies, and now they don't really refer traffic to outside websites as much as they used to. They are prioritizing posts that are keeping you within the newsfeed and don't really give you too many opportunities to click out of Facebook. So it's not so much about Playbuzz. That's, by the way, rebranded itself as Exco. So maybe the reason you see less of it is that it has a different name now. But really the market dynamics have changed. And as for your question, which I'm tempted to dodge, but I'll confront it. Reliance on Facebook. I think that in today's world, if you're a media company, if you're an online content company, you're at the mercy of the gatekeepers. And the internet, even though it's distributed and free and kind of an uncharted territory, it always had virtual gatekeepers. There used to be America Online in the early days of the web, and then Google stepped in and became really the portal of the internet. People discovered content exclusively through Google, and then Facebook took over and became really the primary gateway through which people start their online journeys. Mm-hmm. So like it or not, we are all at the mercy of, particularly of one company. and of a set of algorithms that nobody can really reverse engineer and analyze and even understand.
They change every day.
They change every day, and they don't even change out of a concrete policy. They change out of experimentation and out of machine learning that drives them to certain directions without anyone really guiding them. And yes, they are very, I'm very, put my business aside, I'm very concerned about that, because I think that it has many implications on what content we're exposed to and how exposing us to different pieces of content can really maneuver us emotionally and intellectually in a way that makes people, in many cases, lose some of their best judgment.
Mm-hmm. Before we go on, just a bit more about Playbuzz. I'm not sure people who have no idea what it is really understood. Like, can you give an example for what your product did or does?
Sure. So Playbuzz is being used by a lot of different content authors all over the world, primarily media companies. So in the US, it can be companies like Disney or like Huffington Post that were using the platform in order to create more interactive, more visual content for their website or for their mobile app. So instead of just writing an article about a topic, they could turn it into a quiz or into an interactive video or into an article that has all sorts of interactive snippets in it. And by nature, it made that piece of content much more popular.
Engaging.
Because the engagement of users, when you ask them to respond, when you involve them in the process, the engagement is higher. And as a result, all those great content creators from all over the world, I named a few Americans, but there was the BBC in England and, the majority of the major publications from all over the world were using it to create content that was more important to them. So they invested more. Instead of just writing an article which was easier for them, they actually went into the trouble of creating an interactive experience out of it. And as a result, those pieces of content were naturally more popular with users.
And how did you make money?
So it was primarily advertising based, and that shifted over the years, and now they're actually charging as subscription fee from the partners that use them. And I think business models are always evolving because the way people consume content and the whole dynamics of the market are always evolving. So a company that used to do business in a certain way has to be flexible enough to change that over the years when the surroundings are changing. But I think what didn't change is, you asked me before about how the company was started. I can still remember myself, sitting down and thinking about this idea for the first time. What I had in mind is pretty much the same thing that the company is still doing today, more than 10 years later. It's really about helping people to make content more engaging, more accessible to people, more fun to consume.
So enough about Playbuzz, and now it's called X.co, you said?
Yeah.
And that's actually in its new form where it partners up with companies to provide content. So you're now CEO and co-founder of Piggy. Is it still in stealth mode? What can you tell us about it?
Well, we're out in the product is not yet in the market, but we already spoke publicly about what it is. So I don't mind sharing. We're embarking on a really interesting mission of recreating the word processor. So all of us are using Google Docs or Microsoft Word whenever we want to create a document, whenever we want to create a school project or work on a resume, or send a letter to someone, or do anything that will be stored on our hard drive and we can always access and edit or share with other people, or just keep to ourselves if it's a private document. And what we're trying to do is to turn this into a mobile experience. So you'll be able to actually create documents on your mobile phone. And we're really targeting not so much myself and my peers, but really the younger generation of people that grew up with a smartphone, that are used to do everything on their smartphone, and that are doing things in a very different way. For instance, as we said, they don't read long articles. And, it's probably not very natural for them to write long essays. It's much more natural for them to create what we call stories, to put in a piece of media and a little bit of text and create some interactivity in it, and construct narratives that are not just long-form, print-bound paragraphs, but really more of a multimedia creation. And we're trying to enable them to do that on their smartphone for the sake of document creation.
Cool.
Wow.
I'm actually still interested. I want to go back to Facebook. I think it's very interesting because now Facebook has been under huge debate recently since they banned the president, right, and that whole thing. So and it goes back to what you said about their power. And I wonder, as an entrepreneur, do you see a future platform that can I don't know, be a real competition to Facebook and be more fair, quote unquote?
I think that 15 years ago, Facebook didn't exist. And if you ask someone 15 years ago, 15 years seems like a long time, but it really isn't, because we can all, all three of us aging men can very clearly remember where we were 15 years ago. If I told you that somebody is going to be the size or the, more or less the same size as Google, you'd think I'm crazy, right? You'd think it's impossible. And there you go. So, I always think, be it TikTok or be it someone else that we don't know of yet, there are going to be other powers as well. I think that when you want to reach this kind of magnitude, when somebody is aspiring to be so big, so profound and meaningful in their footprint, they're usually going after the lowest common denominator. And it also means that they'll do anything to get that distribution, which will necessarily mean that they're also compromising some of the values that I think are very, very important to protect. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm concerned about I believe in capitalism, I believe in free market, but I also believe in checks and balances. And I think that right now the lack of regulation and the independence that some corporations have brought them to a certain degree of power, which is really dangerous for society in many respects. And I hope that people will grow to learn better. And we're seeing early signs of some, 5 years ago, I was protesting very heavily against Facebook, and I felt like I'm on my own. There was very little echo to that.
Did you do it on Facebook?
Of course. That's the absurd. Actually, one of the first articles that was about the danger in the growing power of Facebook was published by the New York Times. And I took a screenshot of how the New York Times is paying Facebook in order to promote that article on Facebook. And that kind of shows you how powerful it is. Even when you want to protest against them, you have nowhere to do it but on Facebook. So yeah, I think that there's definitely an emergence of more concern, more talks about potential regulation, more public pressure for them to take more responsibility for the potential consequences of the uses of their platform. But I think it's still very early.
But as an advocate of free market and capitalism, don't you think that the free market can produce a solution? Why should we rely on politicians for that?
I think that we never there has never been an age in human history where technology is so sophisticated that it can outgrow many of the powers and many of the processes that we used to rely on. I mean, right now there's when somebody asks if they can overcome the addiction to social media in general, not only Facebook, you're not only putting their own free will against the Facebook app, you're putting their own free will against the massive work of thousands of the best engineers in the universe that have worked for years to create an algorithm that will overcome their free will and their best judgment. And I think it's not a fair fight. I think that putting my 11-year-old girl against the artwork, the construction of all those mega powers that have invested billions of dollars in order to create a system that will manipulate her free will, I think it's not a fair fight. And I think you gotta level the playing field. So people will be in more control of their choices. Just like the same look, I mean, if we compare it to tobacco companies or to alcohol or to illegal substances.
It's problematic.
It is. It's not a. I agree with you.
Facebook doesn't cause cancer.
Well, we can argue about what they do cause and what are the consequences of that. But I'll tell you
Still,
why.
not cancer.
I'll tell you why I think that that it's an important analogy because of the factor of addiction. What happens is social media, alongside other things, is something that just is designed in a way that will make you consume more of it. The way that there are the choices of what content to expose you and how to position it is meant to trigger, to click the buttons of all sorts of human sensibilities in order to make you spend more time on the platform. And as a result, we are seeing that people, if somebody told you 50 years ago that people will spend an average of like 8 to 10 hours a day doing a certain thing on their mobile phone repeatedly without extracting any tangible value out of it. It's not like they make money out of it, or it's not like they, cure cancer out of it. They're just doing it for the sake of enjoyment. You'd be shocked and say that those people are hooked. Those people lost their best judgment. They are in a loop of addiction which they can't control, and the consequences are enormous. I mean, we're talking about the impact that it has on public opinion, the impact that it has on the ability of self-image, of the ability of advertisers to push things to certain audiences. For instance, social media can direct advertisement for, let's say, gambling-like experiences to people who are more vulnerable to those kind of addictions. And that's how their advertisers make money. Now, you can say that those people who are consuming those ads are free to make their own choices. That's true, but they are confronted with a machine that's much stronger than them, and it's taking advantage of their weakness in order to make money in a way that I think society should be aware of and limit.
But that's the world, right? We're all confronted with the society and the planet. The planet is this system that is stronger than each of us. I mean, right? I am born into a society. I'm surrounded by people that want to cause me harm or seduce me into evil, or
prostitution
or to drive me towards some kind of wrongdoing. And no one says, okay, we need to save Eitan from making bad decisions. So how is it different if it's online?
I would say that you're right. We are born into a world that is shaped in a certain way, but I think that it's the harness is upon us to try and shape the world we live in and try and influence it positively. And I think that taking the approach of that's how we do things around here, or that's how things are, and there's nothing you can do about it, is a mentality that encourages the growth of evil powers or of negative powers. And I think that all of us need to be very judgmental about the world we live in and try to figure out what works and what doesn't. And you mentioned prostitution or porn, for instance, or I mentioned drugs use and tobacco and alcohol. There are certain things in the world that impose threat to people's well-being, and they need to be managed. I'm not saying that they should be excluded, definitely not for internet or social media, but I do think that things need to be managed, because if they're unmanaged, true, we let the power sort of run by them. We let the natural evolution of things dictate who's stronger and who's winning. But I think it creates the kind of world that none of us want to live in.
But it's frustrating to hear that such a successful entrepreneur as yourself, even if we can agree that there are problems that need to be solved, I think the debate here is whether we should turn to free market and to capitalism to solve these problems, as opposed to, and you as an entrepreneur, I would think that you would come and say, yeah, well, if Facebook is such a bad company.
Look at the way Jeff Bezos responded to the Biden tax hike, right?
What did
Jeff Bezos just came out and said, I support the raising of corporate tax from 21 to 28%.
What did you deduce from that?
No, that not all some entrepreneurs see it as a duty,
but
but
my expectations from Shaul are greater than from Jeff. Jeff is who's Jeff?
That's true.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, you turn to the politicians. Of all people.
I think it's a combination. Look, I agree with you. I think it's a lot about civic education. It's a lot about
parental education. You talked about your her life is in your responsibility first and foremost.
That's true, but I think that you're putting me up against someone who's much stronger than me if you expect me to block the influence that is being made, again, by great powers. We're talking about organizations, corporations that have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. They're hiring the smartest people in the world. They're using billions of dollars in funding. They're using all sorts of lobbying and political pressure, and sometimes in a very unfair way because politicians depend on them for their own publicity and good image in order to try and push an agenda. And there's so much that any one of us can do individually to block it. I think that we need to come together as people. We need to tell our legislators, we need to tell our politicians that we expect them to set certain boundaries, which will help us have more control on our environment. And, look, I think that it's obviously it's an uphill battle, but I think that people are beginning to see the consequences of the use of social media and the kind of really unprecedented power that they have in their hands, and are beginning to see that it needs to be balanced. I'm not saying that they should be outlawed. I'm just saying that we need to find the right balance.
It's a slippery slope, though.
But so is not doing anything. And I feel that if you don't do anything, look, if we haven't done anything about alcohol and tobacco, for instance, it would have been a mess.
I'll give you an example. I worked on a political campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
The listeners know I worked with the Likud. And one of the options a political campaign had is to take Playbuzz's tool, implement it in a website as a seamless poll.
Mm-hmm.
You know this option, obviously. And then the guy who scrolls through Haaretz, he sees a poll, and it's just a friendly poll, and he doesn't realize that his information is being collected and then used to retarget it. So, that's the slippery slope. So I'll come and I'll say, excuse me, Playbuzz, I'm not interested in you using your product to collect data, and so it starts from what you're saying, and it ends, and from there, we're in Soviet Russia.
Fair enough. I'll give you more than that. The scenario you just described has happened many times. Playbuzz made a lot of money from political campaigns. Over the years, we've learned to balance that and to limit that and to make sure that it's done in a certain way. But even that scenario you just described, it's still a fairly innocent scenario. I mean, you're answering a question.
In your values, according to your values.
I can only attest to my own values. I can never express your opinion, only mine. But I'll present mine, and I'm happy to hear otherwise. I think that this example in which somebody expressed their political opinion, and as a result now we know how to advertise them, is a fairly light usage of online activity in comparison to what's being done on other platforms right now. I would say that it's not even, it's ridiculously innocent in comparison to other things. But I gave the example of the gambling companies, for instance. There's an algorithm on social media that knows how to identify who are the people who are most likely to spend a lot of money on all sorts of repetitive games that are becoming very addictive, and sometimes make their users spend obscene amounts of money on those games. And it's not really an enjoyable experience anymore. It's an uncontrollable addiction that makes them lose a lot of money and sometimes get into financial debt and all the consequences that it can carry with it. And, there's no regulation against it. But I will tell you more than that. I will say that in retrospect, I feel that at Playbuzz, we should have been quicker to respond and to adopt new policies. But the good news are that eventually we did. And that very same political organization that hired you, we actually turned down some very appealing propositions from them to use our system in a way that we thought was unfair to users.
So but you see my point, though, that because such values are subjective, today you say, well, let's legislate this and that, and tomorrow someone else will come and use your president, and now he'll legislate something against you.
But there are many rules.
Don't you fear that, though?
I fear that. I think it's always a balancing act, and there's no right and wrong. But I think that just like we don't want to live in Soviet Russia, as you outlined before, we also don't want to live in an anarchy. And by the way, the choice is not between, it's not like I'm representing a very restrictive policy and the alternative is, some sort of a heavenly freedom in which everyone does what they want and everybody's happy. In every country, in every regime, there's the legislators, the regulators are constantly imposing rules for boundaries of the game, what can be done and cannot be done, and what are the different consequences. And so it's really a question of, what do you prioritize? What are the things that you're trying to emphasize? How do you want to what sort of behavior you want to incentivize? And then how you send people to try and pursue economic success in a way that's coherent with those values. So, I honestly believe that even though it's hard, and even though we all have human weaknesses, and I spend time on Facebook as much as you do, right? It's not like, I'm speaking for experience, but I also realize that it needs to be controlled, and it needs to stop them from using that control of my mind share and that control of my personal data and information to be manipulated in a way that will make me lose my best judgment.
Eitan.
I feel like we didn't quite solve this problem, but
Eitan's face right now is just.
No, I'm just against most. I think there's room for regulation. What do you mean? I think I don't want to live in an anarchy, but I think that the best approach for regulation is to create an environment for competition, and that should always be the default. So there shouldn't be any restriction on my freedom to operate as I see fit, and for a user to be able to do whatever he wants to do on my platform.
I will just say that
maybe I'm like way too libertarian.
If you created this kind of environment you describe, and you put in front of someone the ability to either drink as much vodka as they want or as much sparkling water, chances are they're going to end up drunk and suffer from liver problems. Or that at least many of them will, because many of them will not be able to make the right judgment of when to stop. And that's why there are certain boundaries. For instance, you don't let people in a certain age have access to those drinks, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's all about, I don't think that obviously we are not in agreement here, which I enjoy because it's, otherwise it would have been boring. But I will say that the argument between us is not whether there should be rules, is as to how restrictive should the rules be. And I think that
how often should you change the rules, if at all? I
think you need to adapt to reality. And when you see what the rules do, then you re-question the policies. And I think that right now, when we see the level of political extreme in all democratic countries and the rise of very extreme political leaders as a result of social media, they organize their base through social media, and the emergence of false facts or fake news or alternative facts or whatever you call them, and how they influence the public opinion. I think you got to address that. You can't just set aside and say, hey, democracy, free speech, capitalism, let the market rule. No. You got to make sure that this freedom is not being abused by people in a manipulative way that can cause damage. But hey, if one thing I'm really appreciative of is the fact that you guys are giving me the stage to express those opinions, even though you don't share them.
Yeah, that's what this podcast is all about.
Exactly. And I think that in order to protect that environment in which we can do that, we gotta keep a close watch.
I don't know. I think that like, for example, there are examples in history where there has been, regulation that's kind of put a chokehold on certain industry, even for substances that we see as like horrible and harmful, like drugs and alcohol. And always those attempts to control and confine lead to like worse situations, like with the prohibition, and even with drugs in the United States. Then you have all these shady organizations, you have crime. Instead of just letting things, and it's not going to be heavenly and it's not going to be a utopia, but I think there will be less darkness when the darkness is out in the light. When you let people operate freely and you don't try and contain the bad, then it just, I'm expressing myself a little bit more philosophically, but I think it really is.
Why did you say when he gave the example about the alcohol and the sparkling water, Why did you oppose his
Because
deduction?
I don't think most people, there's and I talked about this a few times on the podcast, but there's this amazing experiment called Rat Park where they exposed certain rats to morphine, and they gave them the choice of morphine and water, and when they put them alone in a cell, then they chose morphine over the water always, and they became these like drug addict rats that were just wanting their next shot of morphine. But when they put them in Rat Park with this society and they could, have rat sex and hang out with their rat friends, and they chose water. And sometimes the drug addict rats would wean off of the water and wean off of the morphine and go back to water on their own volition, which is amazing.
I bet those rats did not have a Facebook account. That explains it.
Facebook or water, they'll choose Facebook.
Let's talk about the book.
Yes.
Okay. There is no English version yet, right? Will there be?
Well, I hope that some of our listeners will be curious enough to read the book, and they'll actually have to find a publisher that will translate it to English and publish it in English,
or
because they want to read what it's all about.
Or if someone wants to finance the project of translation.
But it was translated. I mean, it was written in Hebrew and published in Hebrew, and it's very recent. I mean, we're recording this podcast really just a month or 5 weeks after the release of the book. So it's a very new and refreshing experience for me.
What's it called again?
It's called The Dream Sellers. And it's really it's a story that will sound very familiar after you describe my biography. It's about a tech founder, a startup founder that starts a company, and that company becomes very successful very quickly. And emotionally and mentally, I guess, is not really prepared to handle this new reality of being so successful and growing so fast and being in the center of attention, and the kind of toll that it takes on its world confronts him with really trying to understand what is it that he wants from life, and whether or not he's I would say pursuing his own dreams, or maybe dreams that others like his family or his close environment have conditioned him to pursue.
Wow.
Does money, here in Israel, everybody's dream is exit, right? To make an exit. Everybody talks about exit all the time. And you guys kind of made exit. How does is it a cliche? Are all the cliches true, or are they false? How does it feel in real life?
All the cliches are true, right? That's how they became cliches. They're just so common knowledge that nobody disputes them. They are so...
You didn't come here in Tesla, by the way, just for the record.
No, I rode my bicycle, my non-electric bicycle. I'm an old-fashioned guy in that way. Look, I think that, what can I say? Money is important, right? I mean, it's important to get by and afford a certain lifestyle. And like everything, we all know it's another true cliche that money does not equal happiness. Definitely not in a direct correlation over time. So it's not like Jeff Bezos, which you mentioned, is necessarily the happiest person in the world just because he's the wealthiest person in the world, or used to be. And I think that the pursuit of
his wife took half, so he's definitely not the happiest anymore.
Maybe he's the person half happiest in the world. But I would say seriously, I think that, when people pursue fortune, it's not so much about the money per se. It's a lot about, obviously people that are under-resourced can only dream about being financially comfortable. And I totally understand that. But I will say that the fact that, as you pointed out, people dream about big money, about a big exit, about making a fortune, it's a lot about a testament for their success. If you've made so much money, it means that you won it, you aced it, you did it, you're the man, you've accomplished something. And I think that this is what the culture and the media and the people are telling us. It's like we are being groomed to believe in that. And it's a very complicated and dangerous message. Again, I think, I don't know what's the secret to happiness in life, but I'm pretty sure it's not entirely based on wealth. So I think that as a society, as a culture, and I'm not talking only about Israel, but about the United States, or really all Western civilization as we know it today, the kind of importance that we give to money, and the kind of the message that we send people that they should make as much money as possible, because that's going to be the realization of their true sense of self-worth is a very problematic message.
And the book talks about all that?
Yeah, I think that the book talks about how in the pursuit of that success, someone, really loses touch with their inner selves. And, to some degree, I feel, even though this story is not my autobiography, it's not really my story, but it has a lot of me in it. And I wrote it because I related to it. I felt like this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how I was in this race and I was actually doing well in the race. Because, if I wasn't, or if the character of my book was just a failed entrepreneur, you would say, okay, the guy didn't make it. So, let's leave him aside and talk about Jeff Bezos or somebody else who did make it. That's more interesting. And I'm saying, no, he did make it. He was doing well, but he realized that this vision, that this image he pursued, he chased, was very misleading and actually has a lot of consequences as well.
When does he realize that?
It's all along the way. I mean, you could see that he's really everybody's jealous at him. Everybody's envious. Everybody's like, everybody wants to be him or wants to be close to him. And you feel like even though he's way up there where everybody like he has court-sized tickets to NBA games and he's on the cover of the Wall Street Journal and he's on television and, many other perks, which are sometimes fun, by the way. I mean, there's nothing bad about that. But you can see that he's not happy and he actually gets more and more nervous and develops more and more, I would say, destructive habits that he's unable to control because of that pressure and because of that being in that position which everybody desires, and actually getting there can be quite scary.
But is there, if we do parallel it to your life,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like you did have a similar trajectory where you were focused all on the money and then there was a turning point and the money and the success and there was a turning point?
So it's all that jazz, right? It's money, it's fame, it's publicity, it's all those little things that again are very rewarding, and I'm not discounting them, but I feel that it needs to be balanced. There was a point in which I really felt like I'm neglecting my family. And neglecting myself, I would say. I'm really just like chasing after being bigger, being stronger. I became, in many times I became really paranoid about losing everything that I just earned or accomplished. And I felt like I'm losing my trust in people because I'm not sure if they're really my friends or do they want something from me. And I felt like I kind of lost this internal sense of balance that is so vital for all of us when we manage our day-to-day lives. And it brought me to write the book. And I guess through writing the book, maybe overcoming some of those challenges and really reminding myself what is it that I'm doing it for, that it's not about just gaining more and more all the time. And it's not about competing with people. One of my closest friends is a startup founder. And for many years, we were really, we developed kind of a hostile competition between us because we were two horses in a race, and at a certain point it was all about being ahead of him. And
that's a good book too.
And I know, well, it's kind of in it. It's kind of in that book. And at a certain point you take a step back and you realize, hey, this guy is my friend. I mean, I actually want him to be successful. It's not his successful doesn't diminish mine, even if he's going to be more successful, God forbid. And it's about this. I'm glad we're talking about it because I think it's something that people don't talk about much. And I think it's really important to understand that when you're in this race, you're sometimes really forgetting the premises of why you even got out to this journey. And if it's all about making more and always achieving more, then it's endless, and you can really get lost in that. In that race.
Words of wisdom.
I have
I just wanted to ask the question that we asked in the intro, but you want to fit something in before?
I have two very
Go ahead.
deep questions I have to ask. So the first one is Israel really the startup nation, or is it a PR stunt?
When I lived in Germany for a few years, And when I got there, whenever I stepped into a room and that room was tidy, I said, "Oh, you Germans are also, tidy and organized." And everybody told me, "Oh, that's such a misconception." It's like, it's not really like that. So it isn't. There is some truth to it, but I think that same goes to us being the startup nation. Yeah, by numbers, we have the highest ratio of startup companies per capita, the highest volume of dollars invested, definitely in the current days, in comparison to the size of the country and the volume of population. And I think that the mentality is very startup-like. It's like we're experimental, we are agile, we are trying to do more with less. We are all after this craziness of trying to achieve something really quickly against all odds and going all in and try to do it in a short amount of time and fewer resources. So from a mentality standpoint, yeah, we definitely have a lot of startup DNA in us as a nation. But by the way, it's beginning to evolve because those startups that were created, not only the tech startups, but just all this mentality is maturing. And now we have more enterprises.
Less exit-oriented and more big company-oriented.
On the technical sense, but even in the sort of mental sense, I would say that, yes, we used to be very startup-like and we're growing and evolving and maturing. And that's actually, a reasonably positive process.
And the second question... Do you think that every kid in Israel can, if he's working hard and willing, become a successful entrepreneur?
I wish that was the case. I think that it's not only true to Israel. We're not born equally. We have very different... I was very fortunate to be born in certain surroundings and certain circumstances that were giving me a lot of opportunities, a lot of resources that not all people have. So, I look at other people around me and some of them were not as privileged and did not get the same favorable conditions. And therefore, in the race to compete against other people and try to, really finish the race first, some people have advantages upon others. So, unfortunately, I think that we should all strive to give everyone as much of an equal opportunity as possible. But as a society, we're not there yet. I'm afraid.
I'm not talking about advantages, though. I'm asking, leave the advantages aside. Mm-hmm. If a kid from an Arab kid or an Ethiopian kid, he's talented and he wants this, can this happen?
Sure. There are many people from the Ethiopian community or from the Arab community that were and are and will be very successful. But I think that statistically, when you come from an under-resourced background and you're not as privileged and you don't have the same exposure and the same opportunities, and maybe the decision makers, the gatekeepers in, for instance, venture capital funds or universities, or everyone that makes a selection, they're certainly biased towards certain populations in comparison to others, or to people who have a certain cultural background that those people were never granted the opportunity to be exposed to. So by all means, it's not a fair game. And I'm glad you bring it up because I think that's something that we should all be aware of and we should all try and see how do we help to bridge this gap or, to narrow those differences.
I just wanted another argument, but I wonder if we should...
I'm aware of time.
Yeah.
So I'm... No, but all I want to say is you're not a free market capitalist.
You see, I think that's the biggest problem that we have is that everyone is categorized like
Labeled.
you so bluntly did in like either you're from that camp or the other. And I think we really need to embrace the fact that you can be a capitalist and yet feel like regulation is in order.
But that's my problem is that then the whole map shifts, right? Because when you have clear labels and you're like, this is what it is, then this is what it is. But then someone is like, I'm still this, but he's over here. And then it's like,
I don't know. I'm a great believer. I was asked once, what is my one motto or one word that describe my business philosophy? And I chose the word balance. I said, it's all about finding the right ratio between things. It's like, we're all aware of work-life balance. And now we're talking about free market versus regulation. I don't think that we should be 100% regulated. I don't think that we should be 100% unregulated. I think we should find the balance. Where does the perfect balance lie? I don't know, but I think it's something that, you observe the reality around you and you figure out what needs to be altered. Maybe you shifted too much towards one side of the spectrum, so you need to balance it a little. And perhaps we're in a bit of a disagreement about where the balance lies, but I think that, it's always about finding that balance.
Mm-hmm. You had something before we go?
So I think before we end, we got to answer the question that we asked, which is Shaul Olmert a novelist? Now that you finished your book, are you, and just before we started recording, you actually told us that you had started this whole journey as a film student.
That's true.
So are you an artist at heart? Are you a creator? Are you a
I feel like I'm a very, very creative person. It's what I like. I read books, I watch films, I try to write them as well. I think it's creativity is very important for me. And what I do in tech, it's not like I started a cybersecurity company or a cloud storage. I have technical background, but I'm not an engineer. I really am a creative person that tries to think, to envision new products and try to bring them to market. And that's really what I like about my job. I like the sort of the aspects of trying to conceive something from scratch and see how it evolves and kind of usher it through the different conditions and opportunities and challenges and everything else. So I feel like I'm creative in nature, and I think that the tech world offers a great opportunity for creative people to express themselves and create new things. So, I'm just very humbled and very privileged to have that opportunity.
So both.
Okay, he is the son of a politician, so we can't get a straight answer.
Yeah, we got through the whole episode without even mentioning.
I appreciated it.
I didn't actually think we'd do that.
Yeah.
But hey, I did give, as opposed to politicians, I did give a pretty harsh set of opinions about very questionable topics.
That's true. That's true. That's true. If we would have asked a politician, they would have walked around the question 1,000 times.
We stopped bringing them. It's just useless.
Yeah. So where can people find the book?
In every bookstore in Israel and online, of course.
So if you read Hebrew.
Exactly. But unfortunately, some people I actually, since I've lived in the States for about 20 years on and off, I have so many friends who live abroad, and they were all asking me, hey, how's it going? When can we read the book? And I always said, well, if you guys really like me, you'll learn Hebrew. But so far, none of them did. So, I guess I have to re-question some of my friendships.
You're on social media?
Oh, yeah.
So let's plug it. Where can people find you?
Everywhere. Honestly, whenever I finish a lecture or something and somebody comes to me and say, hey, I really want to, present my startup to you. And I say, great, look me up. And he said, can I have your phone number? I'm like, dude, come on. If you can't find me by yourself, then maybe we shouldn't be talking. And they're all like, okay, I get it. And they find me on, that social network that we might have mentioned the name of or LinkedIn or Twitter or, I'm everywhere and I'm accessible.
Shaul Olmert, guys.
And I love talking to people.
As you hear it.
Hook me up.
Yeah. Okay, before we go, first of all, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Before we go, first of all, we're sponsored by Masa. So please check them out. Yeah,
check them out, guys. masaisrael.org/Two Nice Jewish Boys. That's spelled out TWO, Nice Jewish Boys. masaisrael.org/Two Nice Jewish Boys. Also, the Forward, guys. They're a great source for opinion, for news, all through a Jewish lens. You check them out at forward.com/2njb, and you get an exclusive offer for podcast listeners. Forward.com/2njb. You get 6 months for $15. Check it out.
Also, Lutz Sheva, IsraelNationalNews.com. Please go and check them out. We are on their website, and they have great content in English about Israel.
And Down Under.
The Australian Jewish news.
Yes. AJN.timesofisrael.com. Check them out for the Australian angle on Jewish news. AJN.timesofisrael.com.
And lastly, we accept donations, so please help us out. Go to 2njb.com/donate and throw some money in our direction. And that is it.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.